Hello, everyone. This is the 5 true crime stories about the most brutal female killers. Let's get started with the first case.
This aged lady may appear as a gentle, benevolent grandma, yet she embodies the evidence that evil knows no age limit. Had it not been for the emergency service recording capturing the victim's excruciating last moments, she could have eluded punishment for her atrocious act. On May 18, 2012, at 5 p.m., Max Dashevsky received an alarming call from his close friend Jonathan Hoffman. Both young men were seniors at Farmington Central High School in the affluent West Bloomfield area, near Detroit, Michigan. Their friendship began in 9th grade during an English class, sparked by a question about their mutual appreciation for Tupac, one of the most pivotal and influential figures in the history of American hip-hop. Jonathan revealed to Max that he had recently failed a drug screening mandated by the court. He had been on probation since authorities discovered a prohibited synthetic substance in his vehicle 2 months earlier. The high schooler expressed concern over his grandmother, Sandra's, intense anger towards him. 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman had been residing in his grandparents' apartment for 9 months following his parents' divorce and their relocation to Arizona. Initially, he went with them, but shortly after their arrival, the family received a severe setback when his younger sister, Jessica, was found to have a benign brain tumor, necessitating multiple surgeries and ongoing medical care. Adapting to a new school and coping with his sister's health issues left the teenager feeling unhappy and despondent. Jonathan was overjoyed when his grandmother, Sandra, proposed that he come back to West Bloomfield and stay with her until he completed his final year of high school. The boy was ecstatic to reunite with his friends and the comfortable environment of Farmington. Nonetheless, not everyone approved of the living arrangement between Jonathan and his grandmother. Jonathan's father, Michael, a prominent attorney for many years, had observed some disconcerting traits in his mother-in-law's personality. 74-year-old Sandra Layne, a retired educator and mother of 5, could be exacting and quite stern with others, but she, along with her 85-year-old husband, Fred, cherished their grandson deeply. Given the high schooler's yearning to reunite with his friends, his father eventually consented. Thus, Jonathan found himself thriving once again at Farmington High School, where he was recognized as the class clown. As an exceptionally intelligent student and a whiz in technology, he had secured a full scholarship to Eastern Michigan University. His peers saw him as a spirited, cheerful, and optimistic individual. That's why the call Jonathan made to Max stirred an unaccountable sense of alarm. He didn't seem like his usual self. In his tone was not only concern but palpable fear. The buddies decided to catch up later that same day. Jonathan assured his friend he would text him within the next 30 minutes to set the time. Max anticipated the message, but 40 minutes ticked by with no update from his friend. Growing impatient, the young man took the initiative to call Hoffman's number directly. The phone rang repeatedly, without a response. Unbeknownst to him at the time, Jonathan would never be able to reply to him again. Just before this incident, at 5:20 p.m., the West Bloomfield Township Police Department received an emergency call from the residence of Sandra Layne, Jonathan's grandmother. The young caller informed the dispatcher that he had been shot. Over the course of 3 minutes, he struggled to breathe and pleaded for assistance, stating that he was on the brink of death. The assailant had left the scene, evidently not in search of aid. The events that unfolded afterwards were even more horrific. The emergency service dispatcher listened as Jonathan frantically called out for someone to save him, followed by the sound of several gunshots. The young man screamed from the pain and then faintly said he was dying. There was a short silence. Then a woman's scream echoed, leading to a chilling quietude. By around 5:30 p.m., West Bloomfield police arrived at the neatly kept lawn of a condo within the serene, gated Maple Pleaseville community. A resident had alerted them to gunshots heard in this wealthy area. Predominantly inhabited by retirees and known for its low crime rate, especially in terms of violent offenses. As the officers disembarked from their vehicle, another gunshot rang out from within the residence. Before they could make their way inside, a woman emerged at the front door, complying with the officer's orders to disarm. A small, elderly woman with dimming red hair, wearing blood-spattered attire, stepped through the entrance, her hands raised in a halt, and informed the officers she had just taken her grandson's life. This revelation stunned the officers, yet it paled in comparison to what awaited them inside the condo. As they entered the premises, the officers were met with a ghastly tableau. Blood and smudges marked nearly every room. Bullet impacts marred the walls and furnishings, and empty shell casings were strewn across the ground. A 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic handgun was found discarded near the entryway. Subsequent forensic analysis would reveal additional magazines for the firearm hidden within the residence. On the upper floor, police discovered 17-year-old Jonathan Hoffman. He was sprawled face down in a crimson pool, suffering from numerous gunshot wounds across his chest, arms, back, and stomach, indicating many shots were executed at close quarters. Emergency medical personnel swiftly transported him to Botsford Hospital, clinging to the hope of saving him. Yet by 6 p.m., the young man sorrowfully succumbed to his injuries. Sandra, too, was transported to the closest medical facility for precautionary measures. Medical professionals performed various examinations to confirm her well-being. The following day, Sandra Layne faced charges for the homicide of her grandson and was detained without the possibility of bail, leaving the determination of her guilt, whether for first or second-degree murder, in the hands of a jury. She professed her innocence throughout. The news of the incident plunged Jonathan's family, friends, and neighbors into profound sorrow and astonishment. They were all left pondering what could have possibly motivated Sandra to aim and discharge a firearm at her dearly loved minor grandson. The news of the tragic incident in the tranquil neighborhood spread swiftly, with the media speculating various theories. There were whispers that Jonathan had not passed a drug screening. Reporters zeroed in on a narrative of two neglectful parents who had left their substance-dependent teenage son in the custody of elderly caretakers. According to the grandmother's statement, at the time of his demise, Jonathan had an illegal synthetic drug in his system, which had previously caused complications for him. His passing was shadowed by another sensational incident involving hallucinogen consumption. Just 2 weeks prior, another youth, under the influence of drugs, was implicated in assaulting his family with a baseball bat, resulting in a deadly incident. Takir Cipriana and his accomplice had ingested a prohibited drug before the assault on their parents. Sandra Layne's attorney contended that she had legitimate concerns of facing a similar threat, fearing for her safety as she was tasked with managing a young man on probation and hard to restrain. It was widely reported that this drug could incite aggression in its users. If a situation akin to Takir Cipriana's had occurred at Sandra's residence, could that justify her actions against Jonathan? Claiming self-defense, this was the rationale Sandra provided to the police and later to the jury. She maintained that since Jonathan's return to West Bloomfield, he had become unruly, exhibited aggressive and provocative behavior, rarely left the home, and mingled with teens hooked on dangerous synthetic drugs. Sandra claimed that Jonathan's parents had not informed her of his addiction prior to his arrival, and during his stay, neither parent showed much concern for his activities. Sandra portrayed Michael, the father, as having abandoned the boy. Jonathan often had fits of rage, destroying objects, damaging furniture in his room, and smashing closet doors. If disputes arose or he was troubled, he would lash out, even breaking his own possessions like his computer, monitor, and phone. Jonathan was depicted as a youngster unable to manage his emotions, as described by Sandra Layne. Authorities verified that Jonathan had a history with illegal substances. On March 17, 2011, he was apprehended and penalized for carrying hallucinogenic drugs. Subsequently, in court, he was handed a 93-day deferred sentence, coupled with a year of probation and the requirement for random drug screenings related to these substances. Jonathan's acquaintances shared with law enforcement their worries about his drug habit and their efforts to steer him away from it. Sandra exerted her utmost effort to help Jonathan reform his ways, concentrate on his academic performance, and abide by her guidelines. Nonetheless, he resisted her attempts, proving to be defiant, erratic, and occasionally aggressive. Fred confirmed that from the moment Jonathan arrived, there were incessant, intense disputes between him and Sandra. She had even contacted the police on multiple occasions due to the high school student becoming utterly unmanageable, sought assistance from the school, but all efforts were fruitless. Sandra recounted an incident where Jonathan, under the influence of drugs, lost complete control, necessitating hospital staff to restrain him to a gurney. The elderly woman implored the teenager's parents for aid, yet his father remained indifferent and did not return to Michigan. Gradually, the grandmother grew to fear for her safety. She confided in her husband her fears regarding her grandson and his disreputable acquaintances. In a bid for self-protection and to safeguard her elderly husband, feeling cornered with no other option, Sandra acquired a Glock 17 pistol for defense in case Jonathan or his friends became aggressive. On the critical morning of May 18, 2012, Layne took the teenager for a drug test, which returned positive for illicit substances. Jonathan was instructed to undergo another test later that day. Upon another positive result, he became furious. While in his grandmother's vehicle, he resorted to swearing, violently kicking the dashboard, and at one point, seizing the steering wheel, compelling Sandra to halt the car multiple times. Jonathan even attempted to snatch the car keys at one juncture. Upon their return home, the confrontation intensified. Apprehensive he might be incarcerated, the high schooler decided to flee to Arizona immediately, demanding $2,000 and the car keys from his grandmother, but she complied with neither request. When Grandpa Fred took the dog for a walk, Sandra felt overwhelmingly frightened and attempted to pacify the teenager, to no avail. She retreated to her bedroom, retrieved the loaded pistol, hoping it would compel her grandson to heed her words, or at least acknowledge her presence. Upon returning upstairs to Jonathan's bedroom and finding him in the bathroom, instead of heeding her, the boy hurled insults, kicked her in the abdomen, and struck her on the head. A struggle ensued, during which Sandra discharged the firearm, then fled to the basement in a state of panic, seeking refuge. After a while, she ventured to check on him, only for the grandson to assault her once more, attempting to wrest the gun away. In the ensuing tussle, she shot again in self-defense. This narrative paints a picture of elderly individuals trapped in a dire predicament that tragically culminated in Sandra shooting her beloved grandson out of a genuine fear for her own life. However, the question remains, is the account as Layne portrayed it entirely accurate? As the investigation deepened, a starkly contrasting narrative began to surface, one that, while still tragic, was considerably more concerning. Initial claims by Sandra regarding Jonathan's alleged violent nature didn't align with the experiences of those who knew him personally. Contrary to portraying him as aggressive, interviews revealed that at school, Jonathan was known as a humorous and peace-loving individual, always quick to diffuse conflicts with his humor and intelligence. His friends, too, testified to not observing any recent changes in his demeanor. Furthermore, Jonathan was described as having a very lean build, standing at just 1.67 meters tall and weighing merely 50 kilograms. Hardly the profile of a physically intimidating person. His stature was notably similar to his grandmother's. It appeared that instances of Jonathan's so-called rage were exclusively reported by Sandra, a claim now met with skepticism. Fred, Sandra's husband, acknowledged witnessing heated arguments between his wife and grandson, but never any physical violence, despite being almost always present at home. He noted Sandra's active role in overseeing Jonathan's education, setting strict expectations that the teenager struggled to meet. Fred even suggested returning Jonathan to his parents in Arizona, a proposal Sandra rejected, contradicting her assertion that the boy was unmanageable under her care. Jennifer, Sandra's daughter, informed police that during the 9 months Jonathan stayed with his grandparents, he maintained daily communication with her and visited them monthly. Throughout this period, Sandra never conveyed any issues between her and Jonathan, nor did she express feeling overwhelmed by his presence. When Jennifer became aware of Jonathan's legal troubles related to illicit substances, she debated with her mother about the best course of action, suggesting either rehabilitation or returning him to Arizona. Sandra convinced her that she could manage the situation independently, leading Jennifer to reluctantly agree to leave her son in her parents' custody, a decision that would later prove to be tragically significant. Authorities were summoned to the Layne household on 2 occasions. The initial call occurred in March 2012 when Jonathan himself dialed emergency services, distressed after ingesting magic mushrooms and suffering from severe paranoia, fearing for his life. The police document notes that upon their arrival, the young man displayed no aggression, merely terror. Upon seeing the law enforcement officials, Jonathan eagerly embraced one, subsequently being secured to a stretcher for his protection and transported to a medical facility. A mere 4 days following the incident with the magic mushrooms, Sandra Layne reached out to 911, reporting that her grandson was enraged and attempting to flee, while Jonathan informed the dispatcher that his grandmother was forcibly trying to confine him in her vehicle. Upon the officer's arrival, they encountered Hoffman vocally berating his grandmother. The the law enforcement officials proposed intervening with the irate youth, but Sandra chose to manage the matter personally. The episode was chronicled in the police documentation as a standard oral dispute between a guardian and a child, which was amicably settled. For the detectives leading the investigation, this case increasingly appeared less like an instance of a rebellious teenager spiraling out of control, and more like a situation where a domineering woman chose to enforce her authority over a defiant child. The hearing on April 12th concerning the possession of prohibited substances and the subsequent probation had evidently enraged Sandra. She was convinced she could discipline her grandson. Up to that point, the grandmother was resolute about redirecting Jonathan onto the correct path. However, as graduation drew near and her opportunities dwindled, this mission seemed more and more like a failure. In that instant, Sandra had numerous choices. She could have contacted her daughter or sent her grandson for rehabilitation. Instead, she acquired a semi-automatic pistol and underwent several shooting lessons at a firing range. Sandra was committed to prevailing in this conflict and asserting control over her unruly teenage grandson at any cost. 4 days after Jonathan was placed on probation, Sandra Layne applied for a license to possess and carry a firearm, and on April 18th, she purchased a 9mm Glock, explaining to the store owner that she required it for home protection. She opted for a weapon intended for lethal force, along with a box of ammunition containing expanding bullets, which are designed to inflict maximum damage on the target and are often used by hunters. Following the pistol purchase, Sandra took lessons at the nearest shooting range until she felt proficient in handling the firearm, all the while keeping her newfound expertise concealed from her husband, who remained unaware of the gun in the household. He was rather taken aback when he discovered how much his wife had accomplished covertly. On the fateful day of May 18, 2012, Sandra and Jonathan returned home around 5 p.m. Sandra requested her husband, Fred, to take their dog for a walk and insisted that he remain outside until she granted him permission to return. They spent such an extended time outdoors that both the homeowner and the dog grew weary. They sat together on the grass and watched a basketball game, as Fred Wayne, the grandfather of the deceased high schooler, recounted during an interview. When the sound of police sirens reached them, the man failed to grasp the situation. So, why did Sandra want Fred to depart from the residence? It appeared less like the action of a woman fearing for her life, and more like the behavior of an individual with a plan, evidently intending to carry it out without any interference or witnesses. If Jonathan had been in the agitated state described by the grandmother, it's improbable that Fred would have left them alone. However, the truly compelling evidence against Sandra was yet to emerge. At the same time that day, 5 p.m., Jonathan was conversing with his friend Max, confirming their evening arrangements. Max Dashevsky informed the police that Hoffman's tone did not convey anger or excitement. Instead, he seemed somewhat frightened. Jonathan was concerned about failing the drug test and apprehensive about his grandmother. He mentioned that Sandra was so enraged that she threatened to send him back to Arizona. Sandra claimed that her grandson violently assaulted her, striking her in the head and abdomen before she discharged the firearm. However, immediately after the incident, medical personnel from the nearest hospital examined her and found no injuries or bruises. Ballistics evidence revealed that Sandra discharged the firearm more than 10 times in various locations throughout the house, with 6 bullets striking Jonathan. 2 shots were aimed at his back, indicating that the young man was attempting to flee from Sandra. Another shot hit him in the abdomen while he was wounded and conversing with a 911 dispatcher. The police were convinced that it was Sandra pursuing Jonathan, not the other way around. The grandmother was seeking to punish her grandson for his wrongdoing, while the boy sought refuge. At some juncture, the woman descended to the basement to reload her pistol, likely when the teenager ascended to his bedroom to call 911. Subsequently, she returned and shot him at close range while he lay on the floor, bleeding, her own grandson. The toxicology report delivered the conclusive blow to Sandra's claims of self-defense. According to the report, at the time of the shooting, Jonathan's bloodstream did not contain any prohibited substances. Only a metabolite of a harmful drug was identified in his urine. The forensic examiner clarified that the residual traces discovered in the urine indicated that all substances had left the body and had no impact on Hoffman's behavior. In other words, Jonathan was entirely lucid when Sandra opened fire on him. Consequently, the jury dismissed the defendant's self-defense claim. On March 19, 2013, Sandra Layne was convicted of a serious crime against her grandson, Jonathan Hoffman. Prior to the sentencing, the elderly woman expressed regret for her actions, pleading for understanding that her intention had not been to take the teenager's life, but rather to help him resolve his issues together. Meanwhile, her daughter Jennifer urged for the harshest punishment for her mother, asserting that Sandra Layne was utterly malevolent and would undoubtedly repeat her actions if given the opportunity. She depicted her mother as a monstrous and obsessed individual fixated on academic achievement. Jennifer firmly believed that everything Layne had stated in her statement was a falsehood. She concluded by stating that her son now resided in heaven, a place that Sandra would never have access to. Layne was handed down a minimum sentence of 20 years, in addition to a mandatory 2-year term for utilizing a weapon in the commission of manslaughter. Her lawyer had pleaded on her behalf, citing concerns about her potential survival during an extended prison confinement. Jonathan's funeral occurred on May 22, 2012, with approximately 700 people who had known and cherished the young man in attendance. They fondly recalled the moments spent with him and cherished him as a cheerful individual who never failed to bring laughter to those around him. As a grandson, Jonathan fell short of his grandmother's expectations, ultimately leading her to conclude that he did not belong in this world. When Ronald Vinci, a millionaire, first laid eyes on Catherine Pileggi, a flight attendant, he was struck by an immediate sense of falling in love. Little did he know at that moment how their serendipitous meeting in the skies would ultimately conclude. Ronald Vinci, born on August 16, 1940, in Fort Lauderdale, Florida, displayed an entrepreneurial spirit from an early age. In his 20s, he embarked on his first business venture, renting a space on the Pacific Coast in San Diego, where he began selling Honda motorcycles. Over time, his small shop evolved into one of the largest Honda dealership centers in California. Ron's success didn't stop there. He went on to open several more car dealerships, steadily increasing his earnings. Those who worked for Vinci often described him as a resolute and strong-willed individual, as well as a demanding employer. Ronald Vinci's personal life included a previous marriage to a woman named Pamela, and together, they had a son named Carey. However, their marriage eventually ended in divorce after several years. Following his divorce, Ron began to indulge in a lavish lifestyle, spending his wealth on extravagant toys. He developed a passion for collecting airplanes and helicopters, even going so far as to acquire a large hangar for housing his collection. Ronald resided in a spacious house located in Rancho Santa Fe, California. He went to great lengths to obtain permission from the county commission to construct a helicopter pad on his property, despite objections from his neighbors. This allowed him to conveniently commute to work by helicopter directly from his home. Additionally, helicopter pads were installed on the roofs of his car dealerships, further facilitating his aerial transportation. In 1990, the paths of 50-year-old Ronald Vinci and 34-year-old Catherine Pileggi crossed in an unexpected place: the sky. Catherine worked as a flight attendant on an airplane when the two first met. Catherine Pileggi hailed from a tight-knit family and grew up in a rural area in Georgia. During her youth, she took part in beauty pageants and won hearts with her charisma and radiant smile. Her beauty and pleasant demeanor attracted many admirers and suitors. After completing her education, Catherine spent several years working as a lab technician in a veterans hospital. However, her aspirations reached beyond her job, and she always yearned for more in life. In 1980, Catherine made a significant career change by leaving the hospital and joining Delta Airlines as a flight attendant. Her annual income at that time amounted to $20,000. She took pleasure in her new job, tending to passengers' needs and serving meals. Catherine even possessed some practical knowledge, such as using coffee grounds to eliminate unpleasant odors, a handy tip for dealing with spills on airplane seats. In 1990, a decade after starting her career as a flight attendant, Catherine had a fateful encounter on a flight. She met Ronald Vinci, a millionaire who was immediately drawn to her charming and ever-smiling personality. Despite the significant 14-year age gap between them, the couple embarked on a romantic relationship. Catherine left her career as a flight attendant and moved into Ronald's luxurious home in California. Together, they shared a passion for travel, with Aspen, Colorado, being a favorite destination for their getaways. Ron and Catherine's relationship spanned a decade, during which the millionaire never proposed to the flight attendant. Eventually, they decided to go their separate ways. Catherine relocated to Florida in search of a new partner and a fresh start. In April 2001, at the age of 45, Catherine began a relationship with 63-year-old Duilio Carollano, who worked as an insurance agent and was financially well off. The couple was introduced through mutual friends. Catherine confided in Duilio about her previous relationship with the millionaire, describing a tumultuous and unhappy time where her ex-partner insulted her, had issues with heavy drinking, and openly discussed his affairs with other women. She revealed that she had endured this situation for a decade, hoping for a marriage proposal from Ronald Vinci, which never came. Duilio, on the other hand, wasted no time and promptly proposed to Catherine. The couple tied the knot in May 2001, just a month after they first met. Catherine was content with the marriage, and after their wedding, they began living together in Miami Beach, Florida. Duilio described Catherine's early demeanor in their life together as resembling a domestic cat, gentle, calm, quiet, and with minimal eating habits. Additionally, Catherine had a profound fear of water. She couldn't bathe in the ocean, sea, or river, experiencing intense anxiety upon entering the water. A few months into their marriage, Duilio began to notice a significant change in his wife, Catherine's behavior. She increasingly requested money from him, demanding funds for clothes, gifts, and comparing him to her friends' more generous husbands. Duilio estimated that Catherine was withdrawing approximately $5,000 per month from him. She used the excuse of educational expenses, but failed to provide any receipts or evidence of such expenditures. After a few months of enduring this financial strain, Duilio decided that he had rushed into the marriage and wanted a divorce. Given their lack of children or shared property, the separation was relatively straightforward. Court documents revealed that Duilio Carollano had a net worth of $4.5 million, whereas Catherine had only $8,000 in her accounts. As Catherine was preparing to move out of Duilio's house, she expressed a sense of sadness and despair, saying, "What's the point of living? I don't succeed in anything. There's just no meaning in my life." In 2005, Ronald Vinci, the millionaire, made a significant life move by relocating to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. He was convinced by friends that Florida offered favorable climate conditions and low taxes. At this point, Ron had already sold his car dealerships and had accumulated substantial wealth. In Fort Lauderdale, he acquired a luxurious apartment on the 41st floor, enjoying the comforts of his new residence. In the same year, Ronald rekindled his relationship with Catherine Pileggi, the flight attendant he had dated previously. Catherine moved into Ron's apartment, and the couple resumed their connection. Interestingly, Catherine's former husband, Duilio Carollano, also resided in the same building, but on a floor 30 levels below. Duilio couldn't fathom why Catherine had reconnected with the millionaire she had once described as a monster. As their relationship continued, Catherine's dreams of marrying the millionaire consumed her thoughts. Both Ronald and Catherine were no longer employed and lived a life of leisure. Their stark differences became even more apparent with time. Ronald was overweight and took pleasure in indulging in rich foods, while Catherine, on the other hand, ate sparingly and maintained a weight of only 42 kilograms. Ronald was known for his love of lively parties, while Catherine preferred spending most of her time at home, engrossed in crime stories. She seldom wore dresses, favoring shorts and sneakers for her daily attire. Catherine and Ron often journeyed together, crossing the sea by boat and visiting the Caribbean islands by air. Catherine's diary entries expressed her ocean phobia and detailed Ron's continuous encouragement for her to conquer her aquaphobia. Her decision to join him on these expeditions, despite her fears, suggests Ron's persuasive impact and possible insistence on her facing her anxieties. Despite Ronald's substantial wealth, he had a penchant for visiting budget-friendly bars along the Fort Lauderdale waterfront. With his friends, he would order $1 tacos and strong drinks. Ronald may have been the life of the party, flirting with women, but he would often humorously remark that his male prowess had long waned. Their home frequently hosted gatherings where Ronald would indulge in alcohol and become increasingly outspoken. On occasion, he would publicly insult Catherine in front of their friends, suggesting that she owed everything to him. Catherine, ever composed, played a passive role at these parties, quietly fulfilling all of Ronald's intoxicated demands, from serving drinks and snacks to tending to his friends. This pattern continued for 5 years, but the millionaire remained hesitant to propose marriage to Catherine. In fact, by 2010, Ronald started confiding in his friends about his desire to end the relationship and seek a younger companion. In early 2011, Ronald Vinci found himself hospitalized due to severe intestinal issues, likely stemming from years of alcohol abuse. Although his doctors attributed the illness to his alcohol consumption, Vinci himself remarked that he had noticed a shift in the taste of his food recently. A friend jokingly suggested, "Maybe Catherine tried to poison you?" Ronald dismissed the jest without giving it much thought. In reality, Ronald had neglected his health. His excessive alcohol intake and the habit of consuming a multitude of pills in hopes of achieving relaxation and better sleep were taking a toll on his well-being. In June 2011, Ronald Vinci made a significant purchase, acquiring a new waterfront home in Fort Lauderdale. This property held a value of $3 million and was conveniently situated just steps away from where his yacht was docked. At the age of 70, Ronald was looking forward to spending the rest of his life in this comfortable residence. He looked forward to visits from his only son, Kerry, and his grandson. Kerry's occupation as a waiter was a subject of jest for Ron, who humorously claimed that Kerry was eagerly anticipating his father's passing. On the afternoon of June 28, 2011, the gardener of Ronald Vinci made a distressing call to 911, reporting an incident involving his employer. When the police arrived at the scene, they discovered the lifeless body of the millionaire in a guest bedroom. Shockingly, his body had been meticulously wrapped in plastic bags, tightly taped, and placed inside a sleeping bag. This bag also contained soiled sheets, and on top of it was a substance resembling wet dirt, later identified as coffee grounds. Further examination revealed a slashed mattress beneath the blanket on the bed. The gardener informed the police that, according to Catherine Pileggi, Ronald had fallen down the stairs, suffered a head injury, and subsequently passed away. However, the officers harbored deep suspicions that his death was far from accidental. During the police interrogation, the gardener provided a chilling account of the events leading up to the discovery of Ronald Vinci's lifeless body. According to his testimony, Catherine Pileggi had called him late at night, urgently requesting his presence at Vinci's residence. Upon his arrival in the morning, he was confronted with the gruesome sight of the millionaire's lifeless body, wrapped tightly in a sleeping bag in one of the guest bedrooms. Catherine, in a state of distress, tearfully implored the gardener to assist her in burying Ron. She revealed that Vinci had expressed a lifelong wish to be laid to rest in the ocean after his demise. To carry out this macabre plan, she had purchased a blue container intended to hold Vinci's body, with the intention of taking it out to sea using the millionaire's yacht. Catherine had already brought the container home and placed it in the garage by the time the gardener had alerted the authorities. Upon conducting a thorough examination, the medical examiner made gruesome findings. Ronald Vinci, aged 70, had sustained 9 stab wounds to his chest and neck, bore marks consistent with hammer blows on his head, and had ultimately met his demise from a gunshot wound to the head. On the evening of June 27th, Ronald Vinci's friends visited his house. Catherine prepared the meal, and Ron provided drinks. During the gathering, Ron mentioned that his passport and one of his pistols were missing. During dinner, Ron complained that the food tasted unusually bitter. Surprisingly, Ron, who was known for staying up late, said he wasn't feeling well and went to bed as early as 7:30 p.m. His friends found this early bedtime unusual and eventually left his house. Catherine Pileggi, aged 54, was brought in for questioning a few hours later, where she provided a detailed confession. She recounted that around 1 a.m. on June 28th, a drunk Ronald Vinci woke up and began verbally insulting her. The situation escalated, and at some point, he chased her down the stairs, stumbled, and fell, hitting his head severely. Catherine claimed that she helped him up and guided him to a guest bedroom on the first floor. Afterward, she went to clean the bloodstains on the stairs. A few hours later, she entered the guest bedroom to check on Ron, finding him asleep with a loaded gun on the nightstand. Fearing that Vinci intended to kill her, Catherine acted out of fear and desperation, grabbing the gun and fatally shooting him in the head. During the interrogation, Catherine admitted, "I was very scared. I was angrier than I had ever been before. I felt like my soul had left my body." Following the shooting, she proceeded to inflict numerous additional wounds on Ron using a knife and a hammer. Catherine then wrapped his body in a bag and attempted to conceal the evidence. She called the gardener, realizing she couldn't dispose of the body alone. Surveillance camera photos showed Catherine purchasing a large blue container at a hardware store after the murder, which she intended to use to dispose of Ronald's body in the ocean. Furthermore, a gun matching the one used to shoot the millionaire was discovered in Catherine's car with her fingerprints on it. Her Bentley also contained a knife, cut up pieces of the mattress, clothing, and rubber gloves, all stained with Ronald's blood. Catherine Pileggi faced a charge of first-degree murder and was subsequently arrested and detained. It came to light that just a month before the murder, in May, Catherine had been involved in a legal matter. Her sister had filed a complaint, accusing Catherine of borrowing money and then refusing to repay it. Catherine defended herself by claiming that the money was a gift and thus refused to return it to her sister. On May 17th, the court ruled in favor of Catherine in this dispute. Ronald's neighbors reported hearing screams from the Vinci house on the night of the crime. Additionally, a witness spotted a white car with a large trailer near Vinci's home in the early morning, which belonged to the gardener. Vinci's friends revealed that he had been wanting to end his relationship with Catherine for some time. The couple had not been intimate for months and even slept in separate rooms within their large house. Just weeks before the tragedy, Ronald had attempted to give Catherine $1 million through one of his workers, asking her to leave his house permanently. Prosecutors believed that Catherine's primary motive was the fear of losing her wealthy partner. However, Catherine's defense argued that she had been a victim of severe abuse during her relationship with Ronald and had acted in self-defense. Nevertheless, questions arose regarding why she didn't immediately contact the police, why she didn't tell the truth immediately, and why she endured the alleged abuse for years without leaving him. While some of Catherine's relatives defended her in court, and a court psychiatrist identified some signs of domestic violence, none of Ronald's close associates could confirm witnessing any mistreatment in their relationship. They described Catherine as calm and noted that she never complained about her life. During the court proceedings, Catherine made a startling accusation against Ronald Vinci, claiming that he was responsible for the sudden death of her younger sister, Angela, 3 years prior, in December 2009. Catherine, Ronald, and Angela had embarked on a cruise in the Caribbean Sea. Angela had been struggling with substance abuse issues, and during a party on the cruise, she had consumed excessive alcohol, leading to severe illness and intense convulsions. In her efforts to help her sister, Catherine performed artificial respiration, but tragically, Angela's heart stopped, resulting in her death. It later came to light that Ronald had provided Angela with some pills on the evening of the cruise, presumably to help her relax. Catherine firmly believed that these pills were a contributing factor in her younger sister's death. In 2014, a jury delivered a verdict, finding Catherine Pileggi guilty of the murder of Ronald Vinci. As a result, she was sentenced to 25 years in prison. Currently, Catherine is serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution in Marion County, Florida. Her potential release date is set for January 2034, by which time she will be 77 years old. The story of successful and wealthy Ronald Vinci took a tragic turn due to his ill-fated relationship with the quiet and unassuming flight attendant. Despite his many wise decisions in life, this particular relationship ultimately proved to be a fatal error in the life of the millionaire. Friend, this is the person you trust completely. You go through good and bad stages in life with them, and you know that they will never let you down. On March 19, 2014, an emergency call was made to the police of the city of Guamuchil, located in the state of Sinaloa in Mexico. On the other end of the line was the broken voice of a man asking for help for his daughter. Officers rushed to the house located in the Las Fuentes area. Upon arrival, they noticed that the front doors were wide open. The police went upstairs where they found the man. His younger daughter, who was no more than 10 years old, sat beside him, both inconsolably crying. The man led the police to a room where the lifeless body of a 16-year-old girl lay. She had suffered over 60 wounds. This news quickly spread, and all the residents of the city learned about what had happened. No one could understand who could have taken the life of such a young girl. Anel Baez Alvarez was born on March 17, 1998, in the city of Guamuchil, state of Sinaloa, Mexico. She was the second daughter of Aide Alvarez and Hugo Baeza. Her older brother was Omar. Later, the family was joined by little Ade. In her childhood, Anel didn't face any particular problems. Although she was initially a reserved child, over time she became self-assured, displaying all the grace and charm. She was very lively and always tried to entertain those around her. Anel's father worked as a tailor, and the family was prosperous, close-knit, and happy. However, all this happiness came to an end when Anel's mother was diagnosed with cancer in the early 2010s. The children had to mature quickly to take care of her. After a tough battle with the illness, Ade passed away in 2012. The family was devastated but did not give up, supporting each other in grief and trying to make life as comfortable as possible. The tragedy brought the sisters so close that they shared everything, experienced sadness and problems together. In turn, Anel continued to be a cheerful and friendly girl, passionate about dancing and music. Transitioning to high school, she became an ideal daughter, taking care of household chores, looking after her younger sister, and maintaining good grades. One of her favorite activities became cooking for the family, with desserts becoming her signature dishes. Anel also overcame her shyness and became one of the most popular girls in school. She even formed a musical group, where she took on the role of a singer, developing a fondness for the ballad Amor Eterno. Around the same time, Anel met someone who would become her best friend, at least for a while. Her name was Arandi Elizabeth Gutierrez. They became an inseparable duo, drawing admiration from everyone around and being considered the most popular girls in school. They demonstrated their bond through social media posts. On October 14, 2012, Anel uploaded a photo with Arandi, expressing her joy about their friendship. She expressed gratitude to God for the opportunity to be close to her, and even wrote that Arandi had become not just a friend, but a sister to her. For a while, everything was wonderful, but over time, the situation changed. Despite being the same age, their personalities turned out to be completely different. Anel was a sweet girl who loved love songs and spending time with her family. Meanwhile, Arandi lived in an unstable environment and became increasingly involved in what was known as the narco culture. This urban community was also known in Mexico as buchonado. Arandi was consistently present at events featuring musicians of this kind, such as the concert of the band Calibre 50 during the closing of the carnival celebrations in Guamuchil in 2014. The girl also held a very clear political stance. On one occasion, she shared on her social media that she participated in a march in support of Joaquin Guzman Loera. On her social media page, she wrote, "March for the liberation of El Chapo. We must join this great cause." This statement was accompanied by a photo. Unlike her friend, Anel typically didn't express her ideology on social media and didn't share the views of those supported by her friend. As a result, the distance between them grew larger. In 2014, both of them entered Guamuchil High School at the Autonomous University of Sinaloa, but they hardly communicated with each other. Each created her own group of friends. Anel started hanging out with Melissa Karime Manuel and Maria Jose. All these friends led a similar lifestyle to hers, followed her everywhere, and admired her. Maria Jose, who had known her since elementary school, considered her the mother of the entire group. Anel assumed this role, always taking care of everyone. She was very polite and orderly. Despite distancing herself from Arandi, Anel never told her father or her siblings about their falling out. Around the same time, Arandi started behaving strangely on social media. On her page, she posted negative and concerning messages. For example, some posts were quite alarming, such as, "Pregnant 13-year-old girls, 13-year-old girls taking psychoactive substances, and my mom is upset that I killed my ex and buried him in my garden," or "Lucky the living, dead she is envied." The initial posts didn't make much sense. She drew them from forums or songs. However, over time, some messages started to look like threats. On February 5, 2014, she wrote, "I'm going to bury you by the end of this year." The next post was on February 23 of the same month, where she wrote, "I may seem very calm, but in my head, I've killed you at least 3 times, and in the end, my mind is filled with new ideas every day." A few days later, Arandi wrote, "Thank God, no one hears my thoughts, and everything will definitely happen tomorrow." The messages didn't stop and became increasingly suspicious. On March 3rd, the girl posted, "Maybe not now and not tomorrow, but soon. I assure you, I won't tell her anything then, but know that I have already mentally destroyed you cruelly." The last post was dated March 16th, where she wrote, "This seriously drives me to despair." No one in her circle knew to whom these threats were directed. However, rumors started circulating in the school. Many said that Arandi was upset with Anel because they were no longer friends. Some even accused the girl of being jealous of her former friend because everyone loved her. However, Anel was unconcerned about what Arandi was posting on social media. She celebrated her birthday with a big party, wearing a beautiful pink dress, and she was the star of the evening. Everything in her life seemed perfect until her absence on March 19th raised concerns among her family. Hugo received a call from the school where his younger daughter attended, informing him that Anel hadn't come to pick her up as usual. At first, he wasn't too worried and thought that she might have overslept or was with friends after school. He immediately went to pick up his daughter. While on the way, Hugo decided to call Anel to check if everything was okay, but he didn't get an answer. However, he assumed that she was probably still sleeping. After picking up his daughter, Hugo tried to contact Anel again, but she still didn't answer. He repeatedly called her number but to no avail, and his worry deepened. Hugo headed to their home in the Las Fuentes area. Upon arriving, he noticed that the front door was wide open. Entering the main living room, father and daughter saw that some items had been moved. They thought it might have been a robbery. Following this, they shouted Anel's name and desperately searched for her throughout the house. Not only did she not respond, but they couldn't find her anywhere. Finally, Hugo reached her room. He tried to open the door, but it was locked, which raised his concern. He knocked several times, but Anel didn't respond. Hugo then broke down the door. What he saw in the room took his breath away. Anel's lifeless body lay on the floor, with numerous wounds and bloodstains around. He immediately called the police, who soon arrived at the house. Seeing the crime scene, the officers initially thought that a very strong person or a group of people had committed the crime. Although there were bloodstains in the room, they were minimal. It was evident that the assailant had tried to clean them up. Later, during the autopsy, the forensic expert determined that Anel had sustained a total of 65 stab wounds. Officers were convinced that the attack was carried out by someone who harbored strong hatred towards her. Moreover, the doors and windows were not forced open, leading detectives to believe that Anel knew the assailant and let them into the house. They even speculated that she might have arranged to meet with the person that day. However, when they checked her mobile phone, they found nothing. Anel had not invited anyone to her home. It was more likely a chance encounter. Since there were no surveillance cameras in the area, officers decided to interview neighbors. A few of them claimed to have seen a slender girl with black hair leaving the house. These statements narrowed down the pool of suspects, and the investigators were no longer looking for a man or a group of people. Following this, officers began questioning Anel's close circle. All relatives had solid alibis, asserting that the girl had no enemies, was very friendly, and they couldn't imagine anyone wishing her harm. However, detectives became interested in a post on Arandi's social media expressing shock at Anel's death. Some people expressed their condolences, but others started pointing fingers at Arandi as the murderer. They filled the post with comments, accusing her and claiming she was guilty of the crime. Arandi deleted her account, but it was already too late. Police summoned several of Anel's friends to inquire about the connection between the two girls. All of them stated that they had distanced themselves from each other, and it was evident that Arandi envied Anel because she was more popular. After the interviews, detectives visited Arandi's social media profiles and found all the threatening posts she had written a few months earlier. But that wasn't the only discovery. The day before, just a few hours after Anel's death, Arandi wrote, "I'm a fool. Oh my God, what have I done?" All through the post's lacked context, everything seemed to align. Arandi was declared the sole suspect in the crime. This information was kept confidential because officers feared she might flee before they could apprehend her. The agents patiently waited for the opportune moment. The case became so prominent that hundreds of people gathered at a well-known funeral home in Guamuchil to bid farewell to Anel. Friends, relatives, teachers, and classmates cried and embraced each other, unable to believe that such a young girl had left life. Despite the large crowd, two people stood out with their presence: Arandi and her mother. The young girl entered the venue with her head down, long black hair covering most of her face. Her attire was striking. In the hot weather, she was dressed in a hoodie with a hood and long sleeves, as if trying to conceal something. Both she and her mother approached to express condolences to Anel's family. Then they sat near the casket, where Anel's body rested. All present whispered and looked at Arandi with tense expressions, noting that she seemed very troubled. A few minutes after her arrival, officers approached her and, in hushed tones, asked her to follow them to the police station. The girl did not resist and went along with the authorities. Interrogation began at the police station. Initially, Arandi claimed she was innocent, but after a few questions, she broke down. She lifted her hoodie, revealing scratches and bruises on her arms and torso. The girl confessed that Anel inflicted these injuries on her when she tried to defend herself. In December 2013, Anel posted a photo online with Arandi, where they were captured hugging, smiling, and partially undressed. Arandi didn't like it because Anel did it without her consent. She asked her to remove the photo, but Anel ignored her. After some time, Anel finally agreed, but it was already too late. Their friendship was irreparably damaged. The situation worsened when one of Arandi's classmates informed her that he had a very compromising photo of her, and she suspected it was the same photo Anel had posted months ago. Since then, she began to contemplate how to seek revenge. Meanwhile, Arandi vented her anger on social media until she finally couldn't take it anymore on March 19, 2014. She wrote on her page, "In a world of 7 billion people, I only like 3 of them." After that, she went to Anel's house in the Las Fuentes neighborhood. Arandi showed up at the doorstep with 2 servings of ice cream and a wide smile. She said she wanted to make amends and be friends again. Anel happily agreed and let her into the house. She even suggested they go upstairs and chat in her room on the 2nd floor, just like in the old times. As soon as the girls entered the room, they started talking and eating ice cream. After a few minutes, Arandi suggested watching a movie. Then she said she was going to the bathroom and asked not to pause the movie. Instead of going to the bathroom, Arandi went downstairs to the kitchen. She grabbed a sharp knife. Arandi returned to the room, hiding the knife under her clothes. She saw that Anel was lying on the bed with her back to the door. Taking advantage of the situation, Arandi took out the knife and started attacking her. Anel tried to defend herself, scratching, pushing, and punching, but she couldn't overcome her. She lost too much blood and fell lifeless to the floor, becoming a victim of a heinous crime. Arandi began to show impatience, knowing that she needed to act quickly, as Anel's family would return home soon. Arandi used all the rags in the house, attempting to clean the blood, but there was so much that she could only wipe away a part of it. Eventually, she went to the bathroom, washed her hands, put on clothes taken from Anel's wardrobe. After that, Arandi closed the door to the room, leaving her best friend's body inside. Then she ran out of the house, leaving the front door ajar. Hearing such an account, Anel's relatives became furious. They knew that the story about the photograph was a lie. Anel was not capable of such an act. It didn't align with her character. Moreover, Anel's friends claimed they had never seen that photograph. They pointed out that since both girls were so popular, it was impossible for the photo not to have spread, and someone would have surely downloaded it. All signs pointed to envy as the true motive for the crime. However, the motive no longer mattered. Arandi was the sole suspect in the crime. She was officially charged with involuntary manslaughter. The legal proceedings were swift. 4 officers escorted Arandi to the juvenile court proceedings in the prosecutor's office specializing in cases involving minors. After a 1.5-hour hearing, Arandi was found guilty. Although it was evident that she had executed a premeditated plan, and the murder was intentional, given that she was 16 years old, she was sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment. She was transferred to the Juvenile Detention Center in Culiacan, Sinaloa. Anel's family thought that justice had been served and it was all over, but they were gravely mistaken. The defense filed an appeal, arguing that the trial took place in Culiacan, which was incorrect, as the crime occurred within the jurisdiction of Los Mochis. The higher court decided to reopen the trial, this time within the appropriate jurisdiction. Despite the expedited process, the verdict was not overturned. This decision sparked widespread outrage among the public. Hundreds of Mexicans and foreigners shared images on social media, with posters calling for justice for Anel. Several polls were conducted, with over 5 million users voting that Arandi's sentence was unjust. Many wanted her to receive a much longer prison term. The trial was conducted again, and the girl was once again sentenced to 7 years of imprisonment. Hugo went out to the journalists and expressed his dissatisfaction. He was glad that the sentence wasn't softened, but believed that Irandi's age shouldn't have spared her from a longer imprisonment. He hoped that she would at least serve the prescribed number of years, but that didn't happen either. On July 6, 2016, the girl's sentence was reduced to 5 years of imprisonment. It was also decided at the same hearing that, in case of good behavior, she could be released earlier. State police officers had to close the courthouse gates as dozens of journalists wanted to photograph her. This case became one of the most high-profile in the country. Hugo was not informed about this hearing, which caused him strong outrage, and from this point everything became even worse. On Friday, September 23, 2017, another hearing was held to analyze Irandi's behavior in connection with reforms in the federal juvenile justice law. The girl was released. She served only 3.5 years out of the initial sentence. Leaving the court, Hugo was extremely dissatisfied. He was convinced that he witnessed a great injustice. The man expressed regret that legislative reform seemed to benefit criminals rather than victims. It's hard to surprise police officers who work with the most egregious criminal elements, but sometimes meanness and cynicism cross all allowed limits. This happened once in the careers of New York City Police Department officers who had been on the job for more than 20 years, fighting the underworld. It was a case of staggering ingenuity. They had never encountered anything like it before. On September 2, 2016, police received a call from the victim, a 35-year-old woman, who reported that she had been robbed. Police officers arrived at her home. Olga Tsvik, an immigrant from Ukraine who works as a beauty therapist, reported that several valuable items were missing from her bedroom. She told the arriving patrol officers that she had just been to the hospital because she felt very ill. She was suffering from severe dizziness and nausea. The woman periodically lost consciousness, even returning from the medical facility. She seemed a little out of it. Finding out the circumstances of the incident, the police interviewed the victim in detail. From the last unpleasant encounters, she recalled a client who came to her house and demanded to carry out urgent eyelash extensions. Her name was Viktoria Nasyrova. Viktoria had been to the salon before and increasingly acted brazenly, as if she and Olga were friends. She was always imposing, but on that day she was particularly insistent. The master replied that she did such work only in the salon and did not accept clients at home. However, it was useless to explain to her, and Viktoria did not give in, so I had to agree to accept her at home. After a while, the victim also told the police that she refused to hang out together, which was persistently offered by her previously unsuccessful friend. There was one more interesting detail. Viktoria was very similar to Olga Tsvik in appearance, and this similarity always confused the beauty master. As it turned out during the interview, Viktoria appeared on the threshold of Olga's apartment with 3 pieces of cheesecake from the best local pastry shop. Viktoria ate 2 slices with gusto, and insisted that Olga take the third. After a brief tea with cheesecakes, Olga felt sick when Viktoria had already left. She felt violently nauseous moreover. She lost consciousness and was unconscious for about 30 minutes. When Olga woke up, she called 911 and was hospitalized by ambulance. However, nothing could be found in the blood. After returning home, the woman noticed that several valuable items were missing and went to the police to report the theft. But the police initially did not believe in the victim's story and suspected that Olga was under the influence of illegal substances, and she imagined everything. She behaved strangely, was lethargic, and generally looked bad. Detectives decided that the whole story about a female doppelganger was a fabrication. However, Olga denied taking substances and defended her point of view very convincingly. The woman was sure that it was because of a piece of cheesecake she had eaten, and she might have been poisoned. Officers conducted a cursory inspection of the scene and found a box from a local bakery in a trash can. The victim confirmed that it was the same box that contained a cheesecake from a failed friend. Officers took it into evidence as it had baking residue on it. Analysis could have revealed whether the treat was the cause of Olga's problems, but forensics found nothing suspicious about it. The woman still claimed that the cheesecake was the cause of her condition. She referred to the fact that she went to the hospital and to the doctors who checked her body when she was hospitalized, but they found nothing. Law enforcement officers then called the medical facility in response to an inquiry about the patient's condition and tests. The doctors refused to provide the information, which was consistent with the confidentiality policy. However, police officers took this as another reason not to believe the victim. It was not possible to find the client Olga had told them about, so the case was postponed until new details of the incident came to light. These details were told by a neighbor, who the very next day noticed a suspicious woman at Olga's apartment. This woman came and went several times, hanging around the beauty master's apartment, until she came face to face with her neighbor. The strange woman said that her friend Olga was sick and hurriedly left the house. The neighbor saw that the door to Olga's apartment was open and looked in to check on her. It was unbearably stuffy in the victim's apartment. The heating was on full blast, despite the 30-degree summer heat. Olga was alive, but she was unconscious. She was lying on her bed, but she was wearing an unusual combination of clothes, revealing underwear and warm sports pants. When the detectives heard about this, they had the feeling that someone was deliberately trying to change the victim's clothes. Scattered around Olga were pills containing a powerful drug. It looked as if Olga had taken the pills with the intention of taking her own life. A neighbor immediately notified 911, describing the strange woman as dark-haired, attractive-looking, and very similar to Olga. After learning new details, investigators became convinced that the doppelganger woman was not a figment of Olga's imagination. Then the detectives took up the case more actively. Everything they saw in the apartment seemed to be a description of a crime scene they wanted to frame as a voluntary demise. Detectives believed that the persistent cheesecake customer named Viktoria Nasyrova was involved. The police began searching for Viktoria, but they had no leads, no information about who she was or her photograph. Later, however, the department was approached by a private detective, a former police officer who had long been following the con artist's violent activities. He had already tracked Viktoria online, where she advertised escort services on a dating site and through social media. The private investigator believed that the woman used online promotion to find victims for her crimes, and the scheme worked perfectly. Viktoria would arrive at the home of the next client, then she would drug the person with psychoactive substances so that they would lose consciousness. After that, she would take everything of value and then go into hiding. This activity could have been concealed indefinitely, if not for this tragic circumstance. Meanwhile, Olga Tsvik finally recovered from the unpleasant events. Then, having discharged from the hospital, she shared on her page and social networks the story of poisoning. After that, one of her clients unexpectedly told that she knew a man named Ruben Barakov, who was in a similar story. Ruben was the owner of a dry cleaner, and the man met Viktoria Nasyrova on a Russian dating site about a couple months before Olga's cheesecake poisoning. The new acquaintance invited Ruben to her home and boasted that she was a very good cook. He agreed and came to her place, but as soon as he tasted the dishes, the man lost consciousness. The friend emptied his pockets, took expensive watches, money, and cards. The man was under the influence of a very strong psychoactive substance and sincerely believes that it almost killed him. Later, when he began to regain consciousness, Viktoria took him to the dry cleaners, gave him to his colleagues and told them that he was drunk, and then left from there. Only then did Ruben realize that he had been robbed. The private investigator assumed the situation was much more serious, and the two victims of the poisoner were very lucky. In 2017, he worked with a client from Russia to help track down an elusive criminal. Nadia Ford turned to the private detective after the disappearance of her own mother, Alla Alexeyenko. The girl herself lived in New York, USA, but was born in Russia. Nadia was originally from Krasnodar. Her mother, Alla Alexeyenko, single-handedly brought up her daughter and son, and she had a hard time. She worked 5 jobs to provide for her children. Nadia dreamed of living in the USA since childhood, and her dream came true when the girl came to study in America in 2007. There she met a guy whom she married and took his surname Ford, but the marriage did not work out, and the spouses divorced. Nadia stayed to live in the United States and successfully settled there. She maintained close relations with her mother, who at that time was left alone. Alla sold her house, which was already difficult for her to maintain, and moved to live in an apartment. In early 2013, Nadia's mother had a new neighbor named Viktoria Nasyrova. Viktoria quickly became friends with Nadia's mother, which generally seemed strange because of the big age difference. Alla told Viktoria about her daughter who lived in the US, and Viktoria got the idea to go to the States and meet her neighbor's daughter. Alla organized a meeting, and Viktoria flew to New York in September 2013. There she met Nadia and became close to her. Her mother's friend seemed like a nice and pleasant woman to Nadia. Viktoria actively inquired about staying in the US, and Nadia gave her some advice. However, Viktoria's plan did not work, and she returned to Russia. Nevertheless, she continued to communicate closely with Alla. In the fall of 2014, Viktoria was going to fly to America again and informed Alla about it. She offered her neighbor to pass the gift to her daughter if necessary. The gullible Alla was happy about such an offer, and asked Viktoria to take money in the amount of more than $6,000 in valuable gifts, including 2 expensive mink fur coats. However, Viktoria began to constantly postpone her trip to the US for various reasons, and Alla began to worry whether she would even go there and what would happen to her gifts. The woman even called her daughter and told her about her worries. Nadia calmed her mother down and suggested that she ask for her things back. On October 4, 2014, the happy woman called her daughter and shared her joy. As it turned out, she made up her mind after all and talked to Viktoria, and the latter agreed to return her valuables. However, this did not happen, and soon, Alla disappeared. The woman simply stopped answering the phone, which had never happened before. Alla was always in touch, and they called each other every day. Nadia contacted Viktoria and asked her about her mother. She confirmed that she had seen her, they chatted over tea, and Viktoria left. After that, she never saw Alla again. According to Viktoria, Alla was going somewhere, but she did not know where. Alla's son also tried to contact her and visited her apartment, but her mother was not there, and the woman never answered her calls. A few days later, the son and daughter of the missing woman received several strange text messages from an unknown number, allegedly from her mother. The messages said that there was no need to look for her, she was happy. The text of these messages was not Alla's style, causing the children even more concern. Nadia realized that something had definitely happened to her mother, took a ticket on the nearest flight to Russia, and arrived in Krasnodar to help investigate her mother's disappearance. Nadia first went to her mother's apartment, but it was empty there as well. The valuables that were supposed to be given to Viktoria were also gone. Nadia went to the police with a statement, told about her suspicions about Viktoria, emphasizing that it was a suspicious neighbor who did not give her mother valuables. The police officers were interested in the information and devised a plan. Nadia contacted Viktoria, asked to meet, and they saw each other. During the conversation, Nadia demanded that Viktoria tell her where her mother was. Viktoria became angry, started shouting that Alla was alive, but she did not know where she was, and fled to her apartment. Police officers who heard the conversation decided to visit Viktoria at home. She was able to convince the investigators that she was not involved in the disappearance, and they had no evidence against her. Nadia returned to her mother's apartment and looked around carefully. She noticed that, despite her mother's absence for several days, the apartment was very clean, as if someone had recently cleaned it thoroughly. She also discovered that several valuable items, jewelry, and 50,000 were missing from her mother's house. Nadia decided to report this to the police, but the investigators, who had already communicated with Viktoria, convinced her that her mother had taken the money and jewelry with her on a trip and would soon return. However, the daughter did not believe this, feeling that her mother was in trouble, and it was connected to Viktoria. Nadia began an active search, printing out flyers with her mother's picture and pasting them around the neighborhood. She called all her mother's friends and relatives, but no one knew where she was. Nadia also corresponded with Viktoria, begging her to bring her mother back, and was ready to do anything for that, even offering a good reward, but Viktoria denied everything. Nadia did not give up hope that she would find her mother alive and continued her efforts in the search, regularly visiting the police and checking for news. But so far, there has been no information about her mother's fate. The daughter hired a private detective. The private investigator was able to find out that Viktoria had rented a car from a service on the day Alla disappeared. The detective reviewed the information on that car and discovered surveillance footage from October 5, 2014. The footage showed the car traveling on a highway outside of town with 2 people inside. At the wheel, presumably, was Viktoria, and in the front passenger seat was a missing 54-year-old woman, Alla Alexenko. She was sitting motionless. Nadia was sure it was her mother, and this footage gave her new hope. The daughter went to the police with the information she had received. The investigators confirmed that Viktoria had rented the car in question and invited her for questioning. During the interview, Viktoria admitted that she had been driving the rented car that morning on October 5th, but claimed that no one was in the car with her. She was offered to take a polygraph, to which she agreed. However, after the polygraph test, she was released pending final results. The final check revealed that Viktoria had failed the polygraph test, and she became the prime suspect in the case. The police planned to arrest her, but Viktoria took advantage of the moment she was released from the station and took the first flight out of the country without notifying the police. In the meantime, the police actively began searching for the missing woman. Nadia stayed in Russia for another 6 months, actively participating in the investigation of the case. She hoped that her mother was still alive and appealed to Interpol to assist in the search. In the meantime, police officers checked the route of the rental car, which led them to the wooded area of Armavir, Viktoria's hometown. The search for the missing woman began there, and the daughter's hopes for her mother's safe return home were dashed when the police gave her the bad news in April 2015. The charred remains of a person who was about 3 hours away from the missing Allah's residence were found in that wooded area. The daughter was able to identify her mother literally by her teeth, as the rest of her body parts were badly burned and unrecognizable. The cause of death could not be determined. After the identification, the arrest warrant for Viktoria Nasyrova was transferred to Interpol. However, the fleeing suspect could not be found for some time. After her mother's funeral in Krasnodar, Nadia returned back to the United States. For a long time, she could not recover from the loss of her mother and could not work. Then she pulled herself together and promised her mother that she would get justice, and those responsible for her death would be punished. One day, while surfing the internet, Nadia came across a picture of Viktoria Nasyrova on social media. The wanted woman was flaunting her beautiful, rich life while in Mexico. The victim contacted the US police, reporting the whereabouts of the wanted woman, and they took up the investigation. It was at this stage that Nadia hired one of the best private investigators in the US, who was able to investigate the case faster. One of Nadia's wealthy friends paid for the detective's services, which she could not afford at the time, as Nadia had been out of work for several months due to the search for her mother. The private detective scrutinized Viktoria's social media photos that she had posted. He was able to determine from the new photos that the fugitive was already in the United States. In one of the selfies, the sunglasses reflected the dashboard of a car. After checking hundreds, if not thousands of cars, the detective figured out that it was a Chrysler 300. He was also able to determine that the fugitive's most recent photos were taken in Brooklyn's Russian neighborhood of Ship's Head Bay. By checking a database of cars of that make in the area, they were able to narrow down the search and locate the perpetrator. Despite the difficulty of the search, they found her location. The detective was able to find out that she lived with her lover in a complex. In addition, the Chrysler was registered to her new man. Viktoria probably didn't even realize that the case had taken such a turn, and Interpol was looking for her all over the world. So she put her photos on the internet without any fear, not realizing that she could give herself away. The detective was able to identify the suspect's boyfriend and contacted him. It turned out that at that time the boyfriend had already become a victim of Viktoria, who escaped using a familiar poisoning scheme. In addition, she had poisoned his Beagle breed dog, which died. This caused an even greater wave of indignation towards the perpetrator on the part of the public, which became increasingly interested in the investigation of Nasyrova's crime and followed the development of events. On March 20, 2017, 41-year-old Viktoria Nasyrova was finally found and detained. Nadia, the private investigator, and the police were able to breathe a sigh of relief. It was dangerous to leave her at large. There could have been many more victims of her atrocities. Viktoria's apartment was searched, where the investigators found Olga Tisvik's identity card. Here it became clear why exactly she became a victim of a dangerous criminal. The fugitive not only needed money and valuables, but also badly needed a passport, the face on which was very similar to hers. Her temporary visa was about to expire, and someone else's ID would help her avoid returning to Russia, where a trial awaited her. Investigators even speculated that she planned to kill the real passport holder and literally reincarnate herself as her. But her plan didn't work, and Olga survived thanks to the intervention of a neighbor. The container with the remains of the cheesecake was again sent to the laboratory for examination, and this time a more thorough test on a wide range of substances in the baked goods found a prohibited drug. The investigation revealed that in order to carry out her schemes, Viktoria gave all of her victims this drug, which is normally used as a sedative. But Viktoria increased the dosage of the drug to make the victims pass out. Olga was lucky she didn't die after the cheesecake. The high temperature in her apartment was not an accident. The fact is that in the heat, the effect of this drug is significantly increased and can even be fatal, and the perpetrator obviously knew about it. Therefore, she added heating in the house and tried to dress the victim warmer, but did not have time. After being taken into custody, Viktoria Nasyrova denied everything, including her involvement in the disappearance and murder of Nadia's mother. She also denied her involvement in the attempted murder of Olga Tsvik and other victims. It turned out that Viktoria was a suspect in the theft of 2 furs back in May 2016, but the case never developed. Later, several other episodes surfaced where she had dabbled in theft, meeting men on the internet, traveling to their homes, spiking the drug, and stealing from them. Most of the men did not go to the police for fear of publicity, and Viktoria got away with it. Due to the pandemic and the lengthy preparation of the case file, the hearing was delayed for about 6 years. The case finally went to trial in January 2023, attracting much media and public attention. Viktoria refused to testify at the trial and remained silent throughout the trial. The trial was forbidden to go into details of Allah's death because the crime was committed in another country. Viktoria's defense rightly emphasized that there was no evidence or testimony that Nasyrova had actually poisoned the cheesecake and forced her to eat it. Olga said that the defendant brought 3 pieces of cheesecake to her apartment and ate 2 of them in front of her, so she ate 1 piece without any fear. The prosecution argued that this was not an accident, and Viktoria had added the drug to only 1 slice, and knowing which one, thus she ate the other 2 without fear and deceived Olga. After a lengthy deliberation of the case file, the jury found Viktoria Nasyrova guilty of attempted second-degree murder. Despite the maximum sentence of 25 years in prison under this article, the judge reduced the punishment to 21 years. However, according to the law, she will be able to request parole after 15 years in prison. For the poisoner, the hardship began during her 6-year wait for trial. There was no trace of the formerly beautiful and chic woman. Her rich life collapsed in an instant. Prison life proved to be very harsh. In detention, she constantly complained of poor nutrition and lack of proper treatment. An assault in prison left her scarred and nearly blind. Nasyrova sued the prison, alleging negligence on the part of the wardens who failed to help her. The dispute was settled by paying her $325,000. In one of the interviews she gave right in prison, Viktoria denied her guilt in all the crimes, including Allah's murder. She claimed that she had nothing to do with the cheesecake poisoning of Olga's beautician. Viktoria claimed that she had eaten that cheesecake herself, and she was fine. She simply shared a piece with Olga, but did not force her to eat it. After serving time in a United States prison, she will be deported to Russia, where she will face a trial for Allah's murder. Her daughter Nadia is very happy that Viktoria is in prison and will no longer be able to escape punishment. On Wednesday, September 8, 2004, Jay Orbin celebrated his anniversary. The man turned 45 years old. Jay had everything he needed in life. His own big business that occupied all his time, a beautiful family, and plenty of money to provide his loved ones with a decent life. Jay Orbin lived in Phoenix, Arizona, USA, with his wife Marjori Orbin and their long-awaited 8-year-old son Noah. The man traveled frequently because of his business, which operated in different states. He was involved in the sale of artwork and jewelry. However, at one point, their beautiful life came crashing down when the man went missing. Jay Orbin knew from the beginning that Marjori would not be easy to deal with as soon as he met her. The guy met her when she was working as a dancer at a Las Vegas strip club he liked to visit. Jay was so charmed by her that he fell in love immediately and soon began booking her for private dances almost every night. But he wanted more than just dancing. He had real feelings for her and wanted a relationship with her. The guy asked her out. He was sweet, kind, funny, and Marjori finally agreed. However, the girl was not going to give up her activities for his sake. She wanted popularity, fame, and money. Marjori wanted everyone to know her, and the whole world was at her feet. She continued to perform, even though Jay didn't like it. At that time, he was still 26 years old, young, not rich, and at the very beginning of his successful path. So after a while, Marjori decided to break up with him because she didn't see any prospects with him. Marjori traveled to Florida, where she used to live. There she met millionaire Michael Peter, who was opening the best strip clubs around the world. He could give her everything, and his possibilities were limitless. This is what attracted the beautiful Marjori. She managed to attract the attention of the millionaire, and a romantic relationship began between them. The couple was even engaged. However, it turned out that Michael had many such beautiful young girls, with whom he met and promised them a great future. When Marjori found this out, she realized that she had no chance. The girl was disappointed in him. She tried her luck a few more times in local clubs and in her personal life, but nothing worked out. She was married and divorced 7 times. Disillusioned with Florida, Marjori decided to return to Las Vegas, where she started her career. It was 1993. She was contacted by Jay Orbin, who all these years was in love with the girl and was looking for her. At that time, he had already established his business and was growing it. Jay was passing through Vegas, saw the billboard, and was happy that he had finally found her. Marjori was surprised by the call, but she was pleased to hear that Jay had been waiting for her all these years. A man offered her a drink, and she accepted. Marjori and Jay met at a bar where they drank all night and talked about life, catching up. Jay was only in Las Vegas passing through for one night for work, and he had to be back in Phoenix the next day. So they were separated again for a while, but they kept in touch, calling almost every day. When he had free time, he immediately went to Vegas, where they enjoyed each other's company. A romantic relationship began between them, which seamlessly progressed to a wedding. They were married in a small white wedding chapel. It was the 8th marriage for the girl. After the wedding, Marjori, in agreement with her husband, decided to leave dancing and her unenviable past behind, focusing on family life at her husband's home in Phoenix. She became a regular housewife who stayed home, cooking and cleaning while Jay was at work. They dreamed of having children, but it turned out Marjori had a problem with that. At the age of 18, she was told by a doctor that she would not be able to have children. The girl underwent treatment for infertility, which cost a lot of money. Jay at that time was already earning well and did not spare money for his wife and for the future child they so desperately wanted. Finally, the treatment worked. Marjori became pregnant and gave birth to their long-awaited son, whom the couple named Noah. Their family life seemed idyllic. The couple were very happy and raising their son. Marjori enjoyed being a housewife, wife, and mother. On August 26, 2004, Jay and Marjori celebrated their son Noah's 8th birthday with friends and family. A few days after the celebration, Jay left for a business trip to Florida, but he soon returned again, since Hurricane Francis made his trip too dangerous. On September 8, 2004, his mother, Joan Orbin, called Jay to wish him a happy birthday while he was on his way home. He told her that he was driving back to Phoenix and would call her later that night when he returned and planned to celebrate the holiday. The woman waited impatiently for the call to properly congratulate her son, but he never called back. It was strange and not like him at all. In the following days, the woman was unable to contact her son. She lived in another city, and her daughter-in-law Marjori answered the phone, assuring her that everything was all right, but that her husband had a lot of work to do and did not have time to contact his mother. When a week passed and he still hadn't contacted her, her mother couldn't get in touch with him, and that's when she realized something was wrong. Marjori continued to insist that there was nothing to worry about. Jay was on another business trip and was therefore out of touch, but that did nothing to reassure the worried mother. In the past, when Jay had been away, he'd still found time to call her. She hadn't even wished him a happy birthday, which was very important to him. But the woman was waiting. Another week passed. The mother gathered a family council and discussed the situation with her relatives. Everyone unanimously decided that it was time to sound the alarm and contact the law enforcement authorities. Then the mother called Marjori and demanded an explanation, or she was calling the police. This is when Marjori revealed that her husband was indeed missing. According to her, Jay had returned to Phoenix from Florida but left again for another trip, not even celebrating his anniversary, and never came back. Now her husband hasn't been in touch, and she doesn't know where he's headed. Then her mother demanded that she go to the police. Marjori did so. On September 22nd, she called and filed a missing persons report on her spouse, or rather ex-spouse, because they were divorced at the time. Detectives asked her for all of her husband's information to put out a wanted notice, including his license plate number and documents. The woman said she would clarify them and call back, but never called the police. The investigators themselves tried to contact her many times to get the data, but she simply ignored their calls. But they eventually managed to get through. The husband was put on the wanted list, and an investigation into the circumstances of his disappearance began. Some interesting details about the relationship between Marjori and the missing Jay came to light. Jay Orbin's life seemed to be going well, but not everything was as perfect as it looked at first glance. Jay and Marjori actually divorced back in 1998, but still lived together as husband and wife. According to Marjori, the reason for the divorce was purely financial. The divorce was proposed by her husband, and it had to do with tax optimization. Marjori claimed that it did not affect their relationship. They continued to love each other and were one family. However, despite living together, Marjori had several affairs on the side. While Jay was away, Marjori brought her new boyfriend, Larry Weisberg, into their home. He not only started staying with his girlfriend, but also moved to live in Jay's house and moved his belongings there, which he had stored in Marjori's ex-husband's closet. This circumstance seemed highly questionable. Also, all the relatives noticed the woman's disinterest in the search for Jay. She did not take part in his search, was not interested in its progress, did not help in the investigation, and was not even at all upset about his sudden disappearance. Instead, she was living just fine without him, enjoying happiness with her new lover and spending money from Jay's business account. Just a few days, Marjori spent $100,000 on various small things: toys for the child, expensive beautiful piano, and other purchases for herself and her lover. The woman did not deny herself anything, and her behavior caused concern not only to the family of the missing man, but also to the police. So they obtained a search warrant for the Orbin family home. Jay's credit cards and his checkbook were found in the house. These were things Jay always took with him when he went away on business. He couldn't just leave them behind or forget them. Jay's cell phone records and credit card statements confirmed that he had returned to Phoenix from Florida. Where he went after that was unclear. There was no further movement on the cards or phone activity, so he could not be traced. Police suspected this was not just a disappearance, but a murder, and believed the wife had a direct connection to it. While the search for the man was underway and detectives were looking out for his wife, on October 23, 2004, a homeless man found a container wrapped in a thick layer of black plastic in the desert, almost on the outskirts of Phoenix. When he opened the container, he discovered a human body inside. That's when he reported it to the police. The police officers arrived on the scene and looked inside the container. There they indeed found human remains that were in a severe state of decomposition, aided by time and hot weather. The find was simply gruesome and shocked the police. Inside, in addition to body parts, there was a wad of money and a used bullet. All the internal organs were missing. Someone had taken them out. The medical examiner who examined the body concluded that it had been frozen after death and then cut into pieces with a saw. It was impossible to determine the cause of death. Only one thing was clear: the killer acted extremely methodically and in cold blood. Not all parts of the body were in the containers. Some were missing, such as the head. It was difficult to identify the body in such a state. This required DNA analysis, which helped to establish that the victim of a terrible crime was Jay Orbin. Unfortunately, no evidence was found. The case of the man's disappearance was reclassified as a murder. Investigators have long suspected that he was not alive, since his wife did not wait and did not look for him. That's why she became the main suspect in the case. There were simply no other suspects. Jay had no enemies and ill-wishers, and his wife's behavior literally screamed of her involvement in the murder. Meanwhile, Jay's wife continued to spend money from his accounts and literally emptied them at a cosmic rate. She even managed to get caught forging his signature on a check when she paid for a purchase. After her ex-husband's death, Marjori immediately went to the insurance company and received almost $1 million from his life insurance policy. Police were contacted by a close friend of Marjori's who claimed that she had previously threatened to shoot her ex-husband over the money. She also threatened to wrap his dead body in a blanket and send it to the desert. Jay's remains were also found there. On December 6, 2004, 6 weeks after Jay's remains were discovered, Marjori was arrested and charged with first-degree murder, theft, and fraud. According to investigators, Marjori killed Jay on September 8, 2004, when he returned from a business trip on her spouse's birthday. The woman, infatuated with a new romance, wanted Jay out of her life, but she didn't want to just walk away. Marjori was already used to a lavish lifestyle, and she needed her husband's money. They were divorced at the time, and she had nothing to gain. So she decided to get rid of her husband in order to get the inheritance and the life insurance payout, of which she was the beneficiary. According to investigators, Marjori waited for her husband to return and shot Jay in the garage of their home, where bloodstains were found. She then froze his body and then defrosted it to make it easier to cut him into pieces. She used a saw and an electric jigsaw to do this. She then hid the container and enjoyed life without her husband. The prosecution had evidence to back up this theory. Receipts for a mop, trash bags, and cleaning supplies bought the day after Jay disappeared. Detectives believed she had been doing a thorough cleaning of the garage to clean up traces of blood, and she had almost succeeded. Purchases were made using Jay's credit cards, including 2 containers, one of which contained remains. CCTV footage confirmed that it was Marjori who made the purchase. The container in which the body was found matched her purchase in color and barcode. The prosecutor believed that she had placed the remains in 2 containers and hid them in different locations, but the second one could never be found. It was also determined that she had painted the floor of her garage to cover all traces. Immediately after her husband's disappearance, she began actively spending his money and put a lover in the family home, knowing that no one would press charges against her. Marjori's behavior immediately gave her away. At the trial, Marjori's cellmate appeared on the prosecution's side and said that she confessed to killing her husband and said that he disgusted her. Marjori also told her that she first shot Jay, then froze, thawed, and then cut off his hands, feet, and head, spread the body parts into 2 containers, and disposed of them by hiding them in different places. Marjori did not mention where, however. The defendant's new lover, Larry Weisberg, whom she had brought into the house after her husband's disappearance, was also questioned at the trial. He was offered immunity to testify against Marjori, meaning that anything he would say in court could not be used against him. However, the man stated that he knew nothing about what had happened to Jay. Marjori had not told him about it, and he was in no way involved in the murder. According to the defense counsel, Larry Weisberg could get rid of his lover's husband in order to eliminate his rival and enjoy carefree happiness at his expense, while Marjori had nothing to do with it at all. Larry's home and workplace were also searched, and the detectives even considered him as a murder suspect. During the search, they found a remote control in his home that allowed him access to the Orbin family's garage. At his work, police found an open package of blades for an electric jigsaw, but 2 of them were missing. The remaining blades matched the cuts on Jay's body, but that was not proof of his guilt, since Marjori could have taken the blade from him as well. In addition, Larry had a solid alibi for the murder. He was in another city, so he was excluded from the list of suspects. The defense argued that the lover could have used the remote control to get into the garage, waited there for Jay, and shot him. But the prosecutor argued that Larry had an alibi, so there was no way he could have killed Jay himself. Marjori herself denied guilt, despite her suspicious behavior, but did not testify again. After a long, grueling trial that lasted several months, the jury, after deliberating, found Marjori guilty on all counts of first-degree murder, theft, and fraud. Marjori was sentenced to life in prison for murder and concurrent 2 5-year sentences for theft and fraud. After the trial, Marjori participated in an interview where she regretted not testifying at the trial. She claimed that her lover Larry killed Jay, and she helped him cover up the murder because she loved him, and also he threatened her and she was afraid to speak out against him. According to the woman, Larry planned the murder to get rid of the 3rd extra in their love triangle. That night, Jay and Larry had an altercation in the garage over Jay coming home unexpectedly from a hurricane when he wasn't expected. The men began to work things out, and moments later she heard gunshots. When she ran out to the noise, she saw Larry, who told her that Jay was dead. According to Marjori, she had never seen her husband's body. Larry had handled it all, so she was not aware of where the other remains were, but no one believed the woman, and all her appeals were rejected. She is currently serving time at the Arizona State Prison Complex. Custody of Jay and Marjori's son has been awarded to the brother of the deceased.
Thank you for watching this video. The old voiceover was used here, but now it's much higher quality. Hit like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and check out new videos. See you soon.